Hello! This is the start of a new series of reading challenges I have planned for my channel where I read 5 books within a specific category. And as you can see from the title, this one is the books that BookTube forgot. So I basically get all of my reading recommendations and my TBR from BookTube, from booktubers talking about books that they've read and they've loved, or they've read and they haven't loved but maybe for a reason that I think that I will love it, and so that is how I curate my TBR. But every once in a while I come across a book in a shop out in the wide world that grabs my attention for some reason, even though I've never heard anybody on BookTube talking about it. So I thought that it would be fun to challenge myself to read 5 books that fit into that category, that I've picked up because they seem interesting, but I've never heard anybody on BookTube talking about them. Now, bear in mind, that doesn't mean that nobody on BookTube is talking about them, because I don't watch every single BookTube video that is put out there, but these are just books that I haven't heard spoken about in any of the videos that I have watched on BookTube. So let's have a look at my TBR. I've tried to keep this a little bit varied. There's still heavy fantasy in here, but I've tried, okay? So the first book I have to show you is actually not one of the books that I'm going to be reading, because I didn't realise when I picked up The Phoenix Empress that it's actually book 2 in an epic fantasy trilogy. So I've ordered The Tiger's Daughter, which is book 1 in this trilogy by K. Arsenault Rivera, and it is that book that I will be reading, not book 2. But this is a Japanese-inspired epic fantasy story that has some LGBTQIA+ characters, so that sounds super interesting to me. But I can't tell you any more than that about it because I don't have book 1 yet, so I don't know what it says on the back of book 1, and I'm not going to tell you what it says on the back of this one because, well, that wouldn't be helpful and would be potentially spoilers, and luckily, even though I have read it, I have actually forgotten what it says other than those themes that I mentioned, so that's good. Next up, we have something that is high fantasy, and that's it. The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, and unfortunately I have this rather unattractive mass market paperback version of the book, which is a shame because I've seen the standard paperback and it's beautiful, but I'm not gonna buy that because I already have this. And the story behind this one is that I actually bought it as a mystery book when I was in holiday in Amsterdam, so I didn't know what book I was buying until I'd actually bought it and opened it. And I have heard people in my own personal life at my book club talk about this one, but I haven't heard anybody on BookTube talk about this one, so that's why it's on this list. And it follows a character named Maya, who is the half-son of an emperor, and so far down in the line of succession that he doesn't even think about it. And then everybody that's ahead of him dies in a airship crash, and so he has to become the emperor, and that was not ever in his plan for his life. And alongside that, there's a good chance that somebody is trying to murder the imperial family, so he has to investigate that too. And this really does sound right up my street, so I'm really looking forward to getting to it. Then, something that is not fantasy. This, I believe, is a mystery thriller type book, All These Beautiful Strangers by Elizabeth Klenfoth, and I picked this up at Yalk because the cover is pretty. No more deep than that. It was really cheap, it had a pretty cover, the premise sounded interesting. I bought it. I think it was £2, so why not? Also, sprayed edges are always fun, so there you go. But I haven't heard anybody talk about this, and that's why it's on this list. So I am going to read you the blurb because I don't think that I could summarise this until after I've read it. So, once I thought my father had built the house on Langley Lake to keep everyone else out, but then my Uncle Hank found the photographs and I realised I had been wrong about everything. He had built it to keep us in. Charlie Calloway appears to have a life most people would kill for. A wealthy family, loyal friends, top grades at an elite boarding school. When her school's super exclusive secret society extends a mysterious invitation, she is determined to get in, whatever the cost. But the secrets they keep are deeper and more dangerous than Charlie could ever have imagined, and implicate her family in not just one terrible crime, but two. They could destroy her or give her the answer she's always craved. Who or what was behind her mother's disappearance 10 years ago? And I think that just sounds fascinating, and I really don't read a lot of mystery or thriller type genre books, but this one really grabbed my attention and I thought it was perfect for this list, considering I've not heard of it before and it's a slightly different genre to break up quite a bit of fantasy, if we're honest. Then we have Last Bus to Everland by Sophia Cameron, which is a book that also has LGBTQIA plus representation. I have actually already started this one today and I'm on page 121, and I can tell you that there is a lot of representation. In fact, pretty much every single character is part of the LGBTQIA plus community, so that's really great. I thought that this one was contemporary, so I'm actually really glad that I've already started it before filming this intro clip, because actually it's not. It's urban fantasy and the characters go to this place called Everland, which is sort of like Narnia or Neverland, that kind of thing, where they can do and be whoever they want to be. And Brody, our main character's real life is really difficult because he has parents who focus entirely on his older, very impressive brother, and he's bullied and he feels very outside in all aspects of his life, apart from in Everland. And I'm not going to talk about my feelings about this book yet because that's going to come later in the video, but this is a book that I've heard my sister wants to read, but I haven't heard about on booktube at all. And then finally, book number 5 is Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. And this is a contemporary, and it's one of those sad, deep thinking contemporaries, which I quite enjoy. This follows a character named Mara, who has a twin brother, Owen, and a best friend called Hannah, who accuses Owen of raping her, and Mara has to deal with that situation and finds that very difficult. This one is also LGBTQIA+, because Mara also has an ex-girlfriend and there's some angst going on between them in this as well. I don't think it's the focus of the book, but that's there too. Yeah, there's quite a lot of LGBTQIA+ rep in these 5 picks. I don't think that that's representative of booktube at all. It just happened that way, so I'm not trying to say that booktube doesn't read diverse books. We all do. In fact, it's something that a lot of booktubers really strive for. So this is entirely coincidental, and also part of the fact that I picked these 2 up at Gaze the Word, so that's why. But yeah, this one sounds really difficult, and I don't know what it says about me, but I'm looking forward to it. So I'm really excited for this reading challenge. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get through all of these books. I'm hoping maybe a week or 2 maximum. I'm not going to set myself a specific deadline for these videos because I want to give all these books a decent chance rather than force myself to read them if I'm not really in the mood for them, because that would taint my opinion of them. But booktube sees a lot of really great books, and so I'd like to highlight first of all some books that I haven't heard about on here, and hopefully recommend some books that I haven't heard about on here, and show that just because you haven't heard about it on booktube doesn't mean it's not great. Also, if there are any types of themes you want me to do for these challenge videos going forward, then let me know. I do have a few ideas of other reading challenges that I want to do, but if there are any that you want to challenge me to, then please leave them down below. But let's get into it and see where this goes. So, I've actually finished 2 books since I last updated you, and you might be thinking to yourself, Sophia, why haven't you updated us? You finished 2 books, it must have been ages. But no, it's only been 2 days since I updated you, because these were both pretty much contemporary books, so I finished them pretty quickly, and I wanted time to digest my thoughts with both of these before wrapping them up for you, because, well, you'll see why. So first I finished Last Bus to Everland by Sophia Cameron, which, as I mentioned, is contemporary but really urban fantasy. It kind of felt a little bit like magical realism, I think. Not that I've really read any magical realism, but this is what I kind of feel like it would feel like. And it's very reminiscent of what I would imagine a Peter Pan origin story to be like, because that's pretty much what this is. Brody is escaping once a week to this magical place called Everland, where nothing ever changes, no one ever grows up, and no one gets hurt, and he can just be fully himself, where back in his real life things are hard for him, and he struggles with bullies and a family in poverty, and yeah, so his personal situation is very difficult, and so he uses Everland as an escape from that. And this is one of those books where there's not a huge amount of plot, but it's also one of those books where that didn't really bother me. I'm not a massively plot-driven reader anyway, but I do generally like a little bit of plot to keep the story moving, and if there isn't, then I can tend to find it a little slow and a little frustrating. But I actually didn't find that to be the case with this one, because there was just so much character exploration and development throughout the book, even though it's not particularly long, and I really enjoyed it. I will say that the writing style won't be for everyone. There is some Scots used in this book, as in Scottish pronunciation of words written into the story, which was a little bit jarring for me at first, only because I'm not overly familiar with Scottish dialect, and I'm not overly I've just never read anything written in that way before. That's not intended as a criticism, just an observation. I can't comment on whether or not that representation was good representation, or whether or not that was an appropriate use of language and dialect, because I'm not Scottish, so I can't speak to that. But I quickly got used to it, and it didn't impact on the story at all, and I actually ended up quite enjoying the book. This was a book that I picked up at Yelk, but was actually a mystery book, as in it was already wrapped and I didn't know what the book was going to be until I had already opened it. This lighting isn't amazing, is it? There we go, I think that's a bit better. So I didn't know what this book was before I bought it, and then I opened it and I hadn't heard of it, and I mean that's the point of this video, but I don't think I would have picked it up based on a cover buy or anything. Not that the premise doesn't sound interesting to me, it does, I just wouldn't necessarily have picked it up if it hadn't been a mystery book, and I may not have picked it up off of my TBR for a while if it weren't for this video. So this isn't going to be a new favourite book of all time, but I do think it's a really interesting one, and I think that a lot of people would really enjoy this, and it's queer literature as well, which is always nice and makes a change because I don't read enough of it. Speaking of which, the next book I read was Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. I should point out as well that I suspect that the use of Scottish language in this was probably fairly accurate because the author grew up in the Scottish Highlands, so I would imagine it's fairly good. This one is also queer literature, but this one is a little bit more heavy in terms of theme, and admittedly it's not very long, it's in 280 pages, but I read it in a day, and that was a work day. I started it on the train, on my way to work, read a little bit at lunchtime. I didn't have a lot of time to read at lunchtime, and then I finished it when I got home from work because it was just that good and that impactful. So this follows a character named Mara, who is really, really close to her twin brother Owen, but then Owen is accused of raping his girlfriend, and Mara has to deal with the fallout of that and deal with the reactions of the various people in her life, so her parents and the people at school and her friends, and not everybody deals with it very well. In fact, a lot of people deal with it really, really badly, and there's a lot of victim blaming and victim shaming, and although just on the trigger warning side of things there's no graphic scenes, there are some descriptive scenes, but they're not graphic scenes of rape or sexual abuse, but they're in there, and the emotions in this book are very raw on those topics, so be aware of that and be cautious about that, because this is a pretty dark book. It's not written in a dark way, it's written in a hopeful, discovering yourself kind of way, but it's still dealing with some very, very heavy themes, and I think that if you're likely to be triggered by those kinds of themes, then you need to just be careful with this one. But it's just a really important book, I think, along with dealing with the rape. There's also the fact that Mara is dealing with having broken up with her girlfriend, who is also her best friend, and so there are themes of loneliness and struggle from that perspective as well. And it's a really, really good book. It's written in a very simple way. It's not written in a flowery writing style at all, which I think is really important because it doesn't detract from the really important messages that this book is not just trying to convey, but does successfully convey, in my opinion. I strongly recommend the book if you're not likely to be triggered by it. If you are likely to be triggered by it, then I very, very strongly recommend caution, because I can see how this would be very upsetting and triggering. But if that's not an issue for you, then I super, super recommend picking this book up, because I thought that it was absolutely fantastic. I gave it 5 stars without question. I don't talk about star ratings on my channel much, if at all, but for this one, 5 stars, 100%. It was incredible and definitely reread material for me. And yeah, so just for this book alone, this challenge will be a massive success, because I mean, even if only 1 out of 5 of the books I pick up make this much of an impact on me, then I am super happy, especially for a book that I haven't heard about. I literally just found this on the shelf in Gaze the Word, and even though it sounded really difficult, I thought, well, it also does sound really good, and I'm really glad that I picked it up, because it really is. It is fantastic. Moving on to something a little lighter, my next read is The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, which I actually managed to get an audiobook of on Libby, so I'm actually reading and listening to this at the same time. I've just started it today. I'm only on page 88, so not incredibly far in. I just decided to use the audiobook to assist me, because there are a lot of fantasy terms that are very long words in this book that is just going to slow down my reading, and actually I think it's the kind of book that I will get a lot more out of if I read it quickly. So I'm just using that to assist me in doing so. So I started it today. I listen at 2 times speed, so I'll probably finish it either tomorrow or the day after. But so far it's exactly the synopsis that I said before, but it's super political, and I'm already really enjoying the main character, Maya. He's really interesting, and find him honest and a good person who is struggling to deal with a situation that he never expected to find himself in. He was so far down the chain of inheritance that it just didn't even enter his mind that he would become emperor, and now he's been thrust into that situation, and it's not a situation he particularly wants to find himself in. It's a job that's pretty full on, and he's really young and he doesn't really want it, but he's gonna have to deal with that situation. And I don't know, it's written in a very classic fantasy type of style, which I think is really interesting, because this is new. In fact, I think that this is the author's debut novel. Yeah, so it was published in 2014. So it's not like it's from the classic fantasy era, but it very much feels that way. So I'm really enjoying it so far. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I am enjoying it. So I will check in with you again probably when I'm much further into this one, or possibly even once I am finished with it. And my plan from here will be to read the mystery thriller next, because then I can finish on a fantasy. So I will have read like magical realism, hard-hitting contemporary, fantasy, probably high fantasy this one. I don't think that there's going to be a magic system, so I'm not going to call it epic fantasy. And then I will read All These Beautiful Strangers, which will be mystery thriller, and then The Tiger's Daughter, hopefully, although it should have been delivered to the store by now and I haven't heard anything. So if I don't get that in time, as in if that hasn't come in by the time I finish the mystery thriller, then I will probably pick up a manga that I haven't heard talked about on here, which is called The Land of the Lustrous. In fact, let me get it. Here it is, The Land of the Lustrous by Haruki Ichikawa, which will be my backup plan if The Tiger's Daughter doesn't come in time for this video, which I really hope it will, because I am really interested in reading it, but I also don't want to delay this video because I'll read that book and review it for you at some point anyway, and I haven't heard about this one on booktube either, so this still fills that brief. So if I finish, it's currently Tuesday night, if I finish this by Thursday night, then hopefully the mystery thriller shouldn't take me too long. Should be able to get this video up next week, hopefully. So we'll see. But that's where I'm at for right now. So I finished The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. I actually finished it last night and I really enjoyed it. I listened to the audiobook while following along in the physical book and I really enjoyed reading it like that. What was the narrator's name? Kyle McCarley, I think, and he was really good, and he read the book in a very posh old English accent from like probably Victorian sort of times, and actually that really added to the atmosphere of the book. I think that was definitely a good way to read the book for me because there are a lot of complicated names of people and places in this one, which is something I'm used to with reading fantasy, but it does slow down my reading because every time I get to one of those words it takes me a second or two to stumble over the word. So listening to it definitely made things a little bit quicker in terms of reading, and in terms of the volume of those words, there's actually a list of persons, places, things and gods at the back of this copy of the book, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 pages long. So that gives you just an idea of the sheer volume of that type of word in this book. Let me just read you a few of them just for the sake of context. So the dead king's name is Varin Echabel, Adramaza, Arkethmoret, Karlathmaza, Cedradada, Miriam Drajin. Oh, I just dropped it. Let's go from the back. Unthalanasa Court. So as you can see, some of the words are really, really long. So definitely reading it and listening to it helped me a lot. I think that it was possibly a little bit of overkill using that many names and places and things with such odd names throughout this book. I mean, it was 480 odd pages and it's a standalone, so I don't know that there necessarily needed to be that much, like that many pages worth of terms that were created just for this book and this world. It definitely did add to the atmosphere, but it definitely also made the reading experience a little bit more difficult, and by sort of a third of the way through I kind of just gave up trying to keep track of the massive cast of characters. It's all told from the perspective of Maya, the Goblin Emperor, who ascends the throne. Is it called a throne when it's an empire? I'm not sure. But we follow him throughout, and in terms of plot there isn't much of one. The basic premise of the book is that Maya is one of the emperor's sons, but he's so far down the line of succession that really he might as well not exist, and his father certainly treats him that way. And then his father and all of his brothers right at the beginning of the book are killed in an airship accident, and so Maya has to become the emperor, and he's not prepared for it at all. He doesn't really want to do it, and he also is looking into why it is that the airship accident happened, because it was sabotage. So that's the basic plot of the book, but this is very much a character-driven book. So if you are a character-driven reader, great. If you are a plot-driven reader, then you'll struggle, especially if you don't like Maya. But I don't know why you wouldn't like Maya, because he is great. He is very lacking in confidence, but very principled, and he's a very intrinsically good person, so he really wants to make good decisions and wants to do the right thing, and that's not necessarily what the Empire has come to expect from their emperors, because by all accounts his father, Varan Etchebel, was a bit of a dick. So I definitely recommend this book, but I do think that the audiobook makes it an easier read, and I also think that just go into it not expecting to follow the enormous cast of characters, because the names are just so difficult to solidify in your mind, or at least they were for me, and I'm fairly used to dealing with names in fantasy books. As long as you go into it not expecting to be able to follow all the weird and wonderful names that are in this, then I think you can enjoy it just for following Maya and his personality and how he chooses to deal with all of the situations that he finds himself in. So I did enjoy this book, and I especially enjoyed listening to the audiobook version. So next up I'm reading All These Beautiful Strangers by Elizabeth Cleafoth, and I'm actually listening and reading along to this one as well, just because the audiobook is available on the Libby app for me, so I just figured I might as well. And I will check back in about this one later because I haven't really got very far with it yet. I did actually manage to get hold of The Tiger's Daughter by Kay Arsenault Rivera, but it's quite a chunky book, which I did know in advance, but I wanted to try and finish this video in a week and put it up on Sunday for you. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish All These Beautiful Strangers, and then I'm going to read Land of the Lustrous instead, because then I should be able to post this video this week, because I've only managed to film one other video this week anyway, so I would like to post this one this week as well if I can. I don't think it should be too difficult to finish this one quickly. It is quite long, it's around nearly 500 pages, but although it's like a thriller mystery type of book, I think, it's also written in a contemporary style, so it should hopefully be a fairly quick read. And I think that the audiobook is about 14 hours and I listen at 2 times speed, so that's only 7 hours, which I should be able to finish this weekend, no problem. And then Land of the Lustrous is a manga, so that should be a quick read as well. I mean, manga never takes me very long to read, does it? So yeah, those are the books that I'm going to read. I will still read this at some point, and when I do I will let you have my thoughts, but just for the purposes of this video and timings I'm going to cheat a little and pick this one instead. Although this is my video and they're my rules, so is it really cheating? Probably not. I don't know, but that's what we're going to go with. And I will probably just check in once I've finished All These Beautiful Strangers, because like I said, hopefully, in theory, it should be a fairly quick read, so we'll see. It's a lazy Sunday afternoon and I have finished All These Beautiful Strangers by Elizabeth Cleafoth. I don't know why I can't cement that name in my head, but anyway, I think that I said in an earlier clip that this is a thriller mystery, but actually I don't think it is. I think it's just a mystery, and it's told from multiple perspectives and in different timelines, and it was okay. I liked it fine. It wasn't anything spectacular. I didn't find it particularly intense in terms of suspense or anything like that, and I pretty much guessed everything that was going to happen apart from the final answer to the main mystery, which doesn't make any sense to me. Not because it's written in an ambiguous way, but because I just don't find the ending plausible at all, which I just never would have guessed it, because it just doesn't seem at all likely to me. I think I'm going to find it really difficult to give you my thoughts about this book because it's a mystery, so I can't really tell you much about it because it's a mystery and anything I tell you is a spoiler. But I think that that's all I can really say about this one. I liked the writing style fine. It was written in a very simple way. So I don't necessarily, it doesn't put me off reading anything else by this author, but if this is the only genre that she writes, then I wouldn't necessarily be interested in picking up anything else by her, because I just found it, I mean, I don't even want to say predictable, because I don't even feel like they were twists. They were just so obvious all the way through that it almost felt like more of we're going along with the character as she figures out all of these obvious things. So yeah, I don't know, it was fine. I didn't love it. But now that I've finished that, I am going to go ahead and read Land of the Lustrous by Haruki Ichikawa. Like I said, this is a manga, so it's not especially long. It shouldn't take me very long to read. This won't be a complete story because it's volume 1. So I'm going to read this now. Probably going to take me about half an hour, I would guess. And once I have, I will check back in and let you have my final thoughts on all of the books that I have read. Okay, so I DNF'd this one, which is kind of sad. It was the last one in this challenge, so I wanted to like it, but I just couldn't follow it at all. You may know I really don't DNF things very often. This is only the 3rd book this year that I'm DNFing, but it's about this world where the people are made of crystals and aliens keep coming to try and break the people and steal them to make them into decorations and precious items back on their own planets. And so the crystals are paired off into watchers and warriors. So one of them watches for the approaching aliens and the other one's job is to stop the aliens from coming to steal the crystal people. And our protagonist wants to be a warrior, but she is a really soft kind of crystal, so she's too brittle to be a warrior. So instead her sensei says that her job will be to write a natural history of their world. But the only reason I understand all of that is because I looked it up and read it in a Goodreads review, because I just could not follow this story at all. It was jumping all over the place. The dialogue didn't seem to match what was going on in the scene, and I mean, there was no blood and guts type gore because they're crystal people, but it was still kind of graphic and it was just creeping me out a little bit. Plus I wasn't able to follow it. I think I only got about 70 pages in, which admittedly isn't hugely far in, but far enough in that I would hope that I would at least have some general idea of what was going on by that point, and I just didn't. And so I went on to Goodreads to have a look at the reviews, and a lot of people were saying the same, that it's really, really difficult to follow and understand what is happening unless you've watched the anime first. And I'm not sure that I would watch the anime, just because the bit of the manga that I had read had creeped me out quite a bit. So, and even with me not really knowing what was going on. So unfortunately, this is a DNF, which is a shame because this video was challenged to read things that I haven't heard about on booktube, and my final one I'm DNFing, so that's kind of sad. But to wrap up everything else I read, I started off with Last Bus to Everland by Sophie Cameron, and this was an LGBTQIA+ book about a boy named Brody who was struggling to fit in at school and met a boy named Nico who introduced him to a place called Everland, which is kind of like Neverland but in a Narnia way, in that you step through a door and you're in this place where you get to be whoever you want to be and nobody judges you and you can find your place, and that's exactly what Brody does. And I liked this book. I didn't love it, but I did enjoy it, and I think that it was an interesting read and did deal with some really good topics in a very positive way. And I think that there are a lot of people here on booktube and out there in the world that would really like this book, so I'm glad that I picked it up. Then I read Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake, which was by far my favourite book from this challenge. This is a very sad and important book about Mara, who is really close to her twin brother, but her twin brother is then accused of raping one of her best friends, and Mara has to deal with that situation and watch the reactions of those around her. Some of those reactions are appropriate and some of them really, really aren't. And it also deals with a whole host of other important issues, and I think I mentioned those in a bit more depth earlier in the video, but I truly enjoyed this book. I thought it was really well handled, and like I said, I haven't heard of this one on booktube, at least not from any of the people that I have watched over the past couple of years, and I think more people should be talking about this one because I think it's really important. I don't think it's especially old. 2018, so it only came out last year, and it's just, I think it's a really important book and I think that more people should read it. So if you pick up any book as a result of this video, make it this one, unless the content is likely to be triggering for you, in which case of course don't pick it up, but otherwise this is the one I recommend out of these 5, 100%. I think it's fantastic and I'm really glad I have it, and I will probably revisit it at some point. Probably not straight away because like I said, it's quite difficult, but I think that it's the kind of book that you will see more on a reread. So there was a lot in it on the first read, but I think that there's probably a lot more in there that I didn't notice the first time round that I'm quite looking forward to discovering when I eventually reread it, maybe next year. Then I read Catherine Addison's The Goblin Emperor, which is a high fantasy book that was a little bit tricky in terms of the volume of characters and the difficulty of the fantastical names of characters and places and things that were included in this book, but I really just enjoyed the character of Maya. I found him so endearing and he was so conscious of not wanting to be a bad person, of wanting to be a good emperor, of not wanting to mess it up because he's so not prepared for the situation that he's in. And I really enjoyed reading his story, and I especially enjoyed the way that the narrator went about reading the audiobook, because I think that that really added to the vibe that this story was trying to create, which was this courtly political environment that this guy has been thrust into that he's just not at all prepared for and not really knowing how to cope with it, and trying to find a way to struggle through. So I actually really enjoyed this one and I'm really glad that I picked it up. And again, I've seen it around a fair bit, like in real life in bookshops and things, but I haven't heard about it here on booktube at all, and I'm not sure why, because a lot of the people that I watch on booktube are fantasy readers and like this kind of book. They like heavily political fantasy stories, and that's exactly what this is. It ticks that box like 10 times. It's perfect for those kinds of readers. So I don't know why I haven't heard about it on booktube, and I think that it fits in really well to a lot of people's reading taste. So while it's not my #1 recommendation out of the 5, it definitely is something that I recommend, especially to those of you who do like to read fantasy books, and particularly political fantasy books. That's exactly exactly what this is. Then I read All of These Beautiful Strangers by Elizabeth Cleafoth. Still can't get that name into my head, and it was fine. It was a mystery book. Mystery isn't really a genre that I read very often anyway, so it's a little bit difficult for me to review it, I think, because I don't necessarily have too much to compare it to. But I did read The Kingdom last month, and this is a mystery book too, and I enjoyed this one a lot more than I enjoyed this one. This one wasn't as suspenseful as this one. It wasn't as unputdownable as this one, and it's not really fair to compare the two because this is like sci-fi mystery and it's just a very, very different kind of book. This was a little bit more of a family drama mystery. See what I mean? I just don't know how to describe it because I just don't read this genre very often, and I liked the writing. The writing was really easy to follow and made it a nice quick read, but it wasn't unputdownable by any means. I didn't find myself in between putting it down, desperate to pick it back up again, which is kind of what I would expect with a mystery. That wasn't present here, and I didn't find any of the reveals particularly shocking, and the final reveal I just did not find plausible at all. So it was fine, but not necessarily as... It didn't really do what I was expecting it to do. But I do like the fact that there are sprayed edges, and it is a very pretty cover, and I'm not sad that I read it. I just don't think that it was amazing, that's all. And those were all the books I read for this challenge, and I've come to the end now and I'm not entirely sure what I was trying to do with this challenge. I guess I just kind of wanted to try out some books that I hadn't heard about on booktube because I like to read broadly, and although I like getting a lot of recommendations from booktube, I do occasionally pick up books just because they sound interesting or just because the cover is interesting. And I mean, out of these, 4 of them were good enough that I wanted to finish them, and I enjoyed them. Some of them I really, really enjoyed. Some of them I thought were great. Some of them were interesting. Some of them were good, and some of them were just okay. And then just the one of them was a DNF. So I think 4 out of 5 is not bad, and I'm glad I did this challenge. Even if I don't have a final takeaway as a result, I still enjoyed reading these books, and I suppose my main purpose for this video was to have some books to recommend to you that you maybe haven't heard anybody else talking about. And I think that I've achieved that because I have 4 books, well, at least 3 books that I recommend picking up, and if you like mystery, then I think that this is worth giving a go because you may get more out of it than me if you're a mystery reader. I don't not recommend this, but I think possibly, as the Goodreads reviews suggest, it might be worth watching the anime first so that you have a better idea of what's going on. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful in some way. I do plan to do more of these reading challenge videos, so if there are any specific challenges you want to set me, then do leave those down below. I'd be absolutely happy to do whatever kind of theme you want me to do. I do have a couple of ideas, but if you have ideas, then like I say, please let me know. But that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks. Bye.